Good day. Welcome here to SportsDaz. It is Thursday, and that means it's time for SportsDaz Football, our weekly look at what's happening in the ladies' football scene. And of course, down the line, we'll be looking ahead to what's happening at the weekend. But today, it's a very, very special program. This day last Thursday, the 14th of January, we lost one of the greats of football, legend, the master he was called. Of course, I'm talking about the former Cork football manager, Eamonn Ryan, who took a Cork team that had never achieved success in the senior level to 29 titles over 12 years, including 2 memorable Drive for Fives, 10 All-Ireland titles. Later on in the show, we'll be talking to the current Cork goalkeeper, Martina O'Brien. We'll be talking to the new Waterford football manager, Ronayne, who served as part of Eamonn Ryan's teams in the latter stages. And of course, we'll be talking to our own Cóilín Duffy, who got to cover many of Cork's successes over that time. But we're only starting with one person, and somebody who was there from the start of the journey to the very end. Of course, our own Rena Buckley, 18-time All-Ireland winner and 11 with Cork. And Rena, Eamonn Ryan, it's like losing a member of the family, isn't it?
Absolutely. And first and foremost, obviously our sympathies to Eamonn's wife, Pat, and to the entire Ryan family. And our thoughts are certainly with them. But I suppose, look, Eamonn was superb with us, and he certainly created a kind of a family atmosphere. And he would have often referred to our players, particularly towards the end, that we were like sisters. And you'd have to say, look, we really were. We were a really close-knit group. And I think Eamonn was certainly integral to that, and he was central to that family atmosphere. So it's a kind of a sad and lonesome time now that Eamonn has left us, I'm afraid.
When I was just reading up on Eamonn over the last few days, of course, I'll be well aware of his achievements with your own team, which we'll talk about in a moment, but I didn't realise the pedigree he had before he even came into the role. You were just starting off your Cork journey when news came in that Eamonn Ryan was going to take over the team. What are your memories coming back then? Because he knew you were getting somebody very, very good.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the only thing was I was quite a young player at the time, and maybe I was up the walls training with school and training with club and underage county teams. So the fact that Eamonn Ryan was announced as manager probably slipped me a little bit. And actually, I remember our first training session with Eamonn, and to be perfectly honest, I wasn't too impressed with the whole thing. I remember he brought us to the farm. I'm not sure if there was a previous session to this, but my first session with him anyway was in the farm. So that would be the UCC ground. So if you've ever been to the farm in Cóilín at UCC, it's a lot of pitches all together. So there's maybe 3 GA pitches, 2 or 3 rugby pitches and soccer pitches. So it's a vast green area. So I remember he sent us off for 2 rounds of the farm. And I remember thinking, I don't know, is this fella going to do the job at all? Like, what's training going to be like for the year? But look, it was just to sort us out to see where we were in terms of fitness. And from there, training absolutely took off. And I suppose, look, I don't have very vivid memories from the early days. I can't remember exactly what he would have said or exactly what he would have done. But I definitely remember the first time someone taught me how to kick a ball. I certainly remember being hugely enthusiastic about going to training. I loved being there. I loved being around the group. I loved listening to Eamonn. We were starting to develop a bit of momentum, which was fantastic to be part of. And even my parents would say, when I came home from training, I used to say to them, guess what Eamonn said to us tonight? And I used to talk about what he did, what he said. And look, he was an exceptional coach, and he was a really genuine person as well. And he was a huge influence on us all.
And even as you're saying that as well, you were a young player at the time, and he quickly won you over after that day out in the farm. But what I loved reading in some of the other tributes on other media outlets you did in the last few days is how in the later stages of your career, you started writing down things he said in your notebook to have them for the future. Yeah,
definitely. I suppose the thing about Eamonn was that when he talked about football, or when we were at training, when he was talking about drills and so on, he put a huge emphasis on how you went about your business, your mindset, your attitude. And he'd say at the start, he'd say, this isn't just in football, this is in your life, in your education, in school, in college, in your work, in your relationships. And he often talked about business and so on, how, to be successful in business, you must have these attributes. And at the time, towards the end of my football career, I suppose I was probably working for myself, and I thought this was gold. I was getting unbelievable information in terms of my football, in terms of my life, in terms of my work. So, I used to go home and jot a few things down. And I suppose that was the high esteem that I would have held Eamonn in.
Because you've already said that by the end of your time together, you're like brother and sister in one way, but he didn't just train you as footballers. Many of you have said this. He trained you, or not trained you, to help you develop as people too. And you just touched on being able to bring that into your own work life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose, look, he was a really positive influence on us in terms of how he carried himself. And I think anyone who has had any contact with Eamonn would understand, what I mean by how he carried himself. He had time for everybody. I don't know where he got all his time from, but he had time for everybody. And it showed the respect he had for every single person. And it wasn't if you were the best player on the team, if you were doing any role with the team, if you were, doing any role in the farm where we used to train, if you were any person who was, doing, if we stopped at a hotel and someone was serving food or, doing any job, he had so much time and respect for that person as he had for the person who got player in the match in the game. He had time for everyone. He had respect for everyone. And if you went to him with anything, be it in football or outside of football, he was very willing to help, very, very just thoughtful and helpful with his time. No, he had quite a rough exterior when it came to football at times, and if you were feeling down on yourself, you were under pressure at training, Eamonn didn't come around and put a hand around you. There was none of that, There was tough love when there needed to be tough love, for sure. But outside of that, that kind of resilience that he had, if you needed him for anything, he was very thoughtful and very helpful. And I suppose that's why we were so mad about him, in that he certainly respected us as footballers, but he definitely respected, each one of us as players as well. And that's why we had such time for him, such respect for him. And I suppose we looked up to him just so much.
He was the first year, of course, he came in as a coach under Mary Collins, I think, and he lost. It was in a league final against Mayo, and he got you to stay for the presentation to kind of highlight this is where we want to get to, and success started to come the following season as well. Even as you mentioned there, Rena, how much you loved him and respected him. Was that kind of the reason it was easy for him to motivate you over the 10, 11 years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I suppose as a player, and even speaking to some of the management team over the last couple of days, nobody wanted to let Eamonn down. Nobody at all. And, Eamonn was so loyal to the group, and he put in so much work for the group, on the pitch and off the pitch as well. Especially as time went by, we realised just, how much time and effort he was putting into the group, how it meant absolutely everything to him. And that rubbed off on each of us, Then we became very, very loyal to the group, and we didn't want to leave anyone else down either. So I suppose in terms of commitment, loyalty, respect, humility, Eamonn kind of took the lead on that, and we certainly followed, and nobody wanted to let Eamonn down.
And it showed too, it came the other way, how much he respected G's team too, because the 2010 game against Tyrone, the one lost during your golden run, he described it as a pebble in the shoe. And also, if you just look at the 2014 All-Ireland final win, it didn't look like it was going to be Cork's day. He never panicked because he trusted you to get the job done. Yeah,
he did. And I suppose I just think we were so lucky that we had Eamonn as a manager when we had him. I suppose he had a huge amount of experience built up at that stage. He was still he began his management career while he was still playing, and I don't think there was ever a year he didn't coach a team or wasn't involved in a team. So I suppose when he came to us, he probably wasn't a young manager. No, he had the attitude of a young manager, in that his enthusiasm was second to none, his energy was second to none, and his desire to continue to improve and to learn was second to none. But I suppose at that stage of his life as well, he had a kind of he was able to sit back and realize there's more to life than winning and losing matches. No, he had an extremely strong desire to win, but he had an understanding as well that at times things do go wrong. He would have played a lot himself. He would have had a great understanding, about players. There was clips there about, him understanding that a player never means to make a bags of things. And he really did understand that as long as your attitude was correct, as long as you were doing your very best, Eamonn had time for you. And I suppose as players, we did understand that. And that would give you a sense of freedom and a sense of confidence as well.
And I just go to show exactly how he worked the best with his players too. Eamonn has a list of achievements there. I'll go through it before the end of the show. Rena, a couple of questions before I finish up. You just touched on there, talking to members of the management team, and no doubt you've been talking to some of your old colleagues too. The times we're living in at the moment, it's been very difficult for everyone to get together, but it's been, in one way, it's been great to get people together to talk about Eamonn and to remember him. Absolutely.
Look, first and foremost, it's just such a pity, just with COVID restrictions and so on, that you don't get a chance to really celebrate any life. And look, for us, Eamonn was very special, and we would have loved to have come together to celebrate Eamonn. But look, c'est la vie. We obviously must go with the times we're in at the moment. But yeah, look, Eamonn was a really, really special person. He was a kind person, a gentle person. He would push you, get the most out of you. But I think it goes without saying that, look, ladies football would have transformed hugely over my playing time. There was a huge change in terms of popularity, but there was a huge change in terms of standard of play as well. There was certainly a huge change in the Cork setup, and I think Eamonn was pivotal to that. So I think he had a huge effect on players. I think he had a huge effect on the Cork team. But I would go further and say I think he had a huge effect on ladies football as a sport. He would have upped the standard of ladies football and brought it to the heights that we're experiencing at the moment. So look, obviously he wasn't single-handed in that, but he certainly had a huge, huge hand in it. So for that, we're hugely grateful to have had Eamonn with us for so long. It was, in this time of reflection, it's just been fantastic, and we're so grateful for all he's done for us, and for his family, for allowing him to spend that much time with us. It's been fantastic, so we thank them for that.
They work from the start, yeah. You'd have to be happy with the performance. There'll be little things when we watch the DVD now. There'll be things probably we could maybe complain about, but just as an initial reaction, you have to be happy, Now,
I'm joined now by the current Cork football goalkeeper, Martina O'Brien. And Martina, when you broke into the Cork team, of course, Eamonn Ryan was the man in charge. Tell us about how you ended up making your senior debut under him.
Yeah, so I suppose I spent 3.5 years on the panel when Eamonn was there. It was 2013, and I actually didn't join panel until kind of halfway through the year. I think my first match that I attended was actually the league final, so I made it in for a good one. So Elaine Hart was actually, I think she was going away for like 6 weeks of the summer, and the sub goalie Lisa Crowley actually got injured maybe a couple of weeks previous to that, and they were looking just for a replacement. So I got a call to see if I'd come in and just join the panel and kind of just help out, I suppose, for the start, and see how it goes. I had previously, I suppose, done trials with Cork maybe a couple of years before that. So, I would have been in and out and kind of familiar with the setup anyway. But I came in anyway in 2013, and my first game, and I actually ended up being sub-keeper the day of the league final. Then I think we were into Munster, so we won that, and then we were into Munster. And I played a piece of a game, I think it was against Clare that year. And then Elaine actually went away. She was travelling for 6 weeks, and she missed the Munster final. And that was actually my first kind of big game to start. And I then played, we lost that Munster final. And I then played the qualifier, the quarter final, and the semi-final of that year. So I suppose for me, it was full on. Like, I was in there, and I kind of was shoved in straight away. But like, Eamonn was great. Like, the full confidence. Like, it didn't, like, I was only in the door, and I suppose I didn't have any experience, or much experience anyway, of the senior setup and playing senior intercounty. But he just gave confidence. I mean, you didn't think twice that he was second guessing you or anything. was brilliant like that. I was made feel very, very welcome for one. I was never made feel like, oh, you're only in here now to fill a space. Once I came in, I was in, and it was put the head down and do as much as you can, and work as hard as you can. And I suppose, look, all the other tributes through the last week, he instilled that in the players. You work hard for yourself, for each other, and once you work hard and you leave everything there, the result usually takes care of itself. And he brought that ethos in, and you can see that from the start, went back in 2004, all the way up till our last All-Ireland final win in 2015. And the 3.5 years I was involved were probably, they were the best. I learned so much in 3.5 years than I suppose I would have maybe in the rest of my career playing football. And I suppose I have a lot to thank Eamonn for that. I wouldn't be where I am now. I'm still playing with Cork, and I'm lucky to be in the position that I am. And that started in 2013. And that started with Eamonn, and that started with the management that were there.
We were talking to Rena beforehand too, and trying to get impressions when he came into the Cork setup first. But of course, as you just touched on there, 2013, you made your debut with the A team, but you would have been involved with the B side a couple of years beforehand as well. And while you wouldn't have been working directly under Eamonn, you would have been probably some interaction, as you touched on, with trials. What were your impressions of him before you even got involved or got to know him?
I suppose, you're just in awe, really. We were watching a team here, I suppose when I was growing up, I was watching this team who were just doing amazing things. They were really pushing the boundaries in ladies football, and anything that you would hear coming out of about the team and everything like that, it was always so positive. And I suppose the interactions that I would have had previous to 2013 were, again, always positive. Even going for trials and maybe going in for 1 or 2 training sessions, the sense of just everybody was literally hanging on what Eamonn was saying, because you knew it was good stuff that was going to come out. And every training session you went to, you knew you were going to learn something new. And that we used to go to training, you might do some similar drills, and it was a lot of working and skills and stuff, but you still knew you were going to come away being better than what you were when you came. And that wasn't Eamonn never, he wouldn't be standing there and preaching for 20, 30 minutes before training. You'd come to training, warm up, might have a few words, and then you're in and you're working as hard as you can, and he'll give pointers every now and then. And it was a really smooth way of working with a team, I suppose. Everyone came, you had a collective goal, and you could see that working week on week, training on training. Obviously there was blips in the road, there's always going to be that, but I suppose that was the measure of the team and of him as well. When things didn't go right, they probably reflected, and it went better after that then. There was never any finger pointing, there was never any, okay, you need to do this better, you need to do that. It was all kind of self-reflection and group reflection, really. I actually don't ever remember a time Eamonn pointing out a player that they should do this, that or the other. He never raised his voice. I don't ever remember him giving out to me or anything like that. And I would have probably made a lot of mistakes the first couple of years I was there. So I suppose it's just a measure of him and his coaching style. But I think his coaching style was also the way he was. He was just a lovely man. He, even outside of football, if you talk to Eamonn, he had that really calm mannerism. He was really, he was quiet, but he chatted away, and he always just had such good stories. And I think what I would remember is there's a lot of times there, not just games, but probably coming up into games, he just, the way he held the room was amazing. I remember actually we played, I think it was Galway in Limerick in the quarter final. Galway had beaten us, or I don't know, we were probably underdogs on the day, but I just remember he came in and he gave his speech beforehand, and it was literally everyone was just on the edge of their seat. And it was a piece taken out of a paper that he'd read an article, and he was just relaying this in his own way. But we were literally hanging on every word. I swear we nearly ran through the wall to go out onto the pitch, you know. Like, it wasn't aggressive stuff or nothing, but it was just the way he told the story, and I suppose the motivation that everybody would have got from just listening to him. He just had a great way about him, and he definitely, I suppose, he just made everyone feel like they were part of the team, that they were contributing to what was happening. Whether that was management or if that was a player who was maybe number 31, he made everyone feel like you're contributing to what we're doing. You're no less valued than, say, the number 8 on the pitch, you know. So like, he just, the way that he brought everyone together, it's like, I suppose you just don't see it a lot, and he's probably one in a million that, like, for anybody to come across a coach like that again, it probably won't happen.
Because it's, even from people I've talked to as well, I get this kind of family, and I probably would have sensed that on the outside when I was following you during those All-Ireland winning years. But even as you touched on a point there, that Eamonn was not known for giving out. He'd be like the parental role. When he was disappointed, it'd be actually worse for yourselves, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I suppose even you'd never know if Eamonn was, like, he was never angry. Like, so you kind of knew he might have been upset with the team or whatever by the way he would, our next training went maybe. There was a lot of no ball sessions sometimes if we hadn't been doing what we were supposed to. But no, I suppose it was just the way he held himself. Like, he never lost his temper. He never shouted and roared. He just, I suppose, he would always have expected a certain standard, and now that was for himself as well as us. And if we didn't quite meet that, it wasn't a blame game, but he just knew that there was more there. And I suppose he was always looking for that extra little bit from people, because he knew it was there. He knew it was in you. Like, you probably wouldn't have lasted too long on the panel had you not been able to really push yourself and continue to push that. He could read players, he probably could read players who he knew were going to stick around and do enough to make the team, and he probably knew the players that wouldn't. He could read people very well, I feel, and he just, like, I even when I came in, like, I was probably grossly unfit for senior intercounty. Like, I wouldn't have been doing half the training what they were, and like, I was last in every run you could think of. But like, he knew that the effort was there, that it wasn't just, oh, I'm just being lazy. He knew if people were making an effort, that was enough, and that he knew that the next time you probably improve and you continue to improve, because he never had like expectations for us that were OTT. He just knew that people could step up every time, and I suppose having that confidence in players then just meant that we obviously had confidence in him. You know, like, that's why we would, like, you'd be hanging on every word, because you just knew what he was saying was unreal, like, and it was going to bring us to a place that we were going to be better players and better people. Like, you hear a lot of the girls saying it's not just on the field that you improved, it was as a person. You learned so much humility, you learned how to be humble, I suppose, and they were the big teachings. Like, you never saw a Cork team winning and running around and in opponents' faces, or they were never sore losers either, you know. So it was, he instilled, I suppose, just values, not just on the pitch but off the pitch as well.
As even Rena said, and you were touched on too, he just wanted everybody to give the same amount of effort that they were putting in as well, and everybody in it as one. I read a nice story about your first year in 2013 from Elaine Hart, because as you mentioned, Elaine had been away and you'd gotten your breakthrough and you started up until the semi-final, but unfortunately for yourself, you didn't get to start the final. But Eamonn did something that time that he's not known for doing. Was he actually told you in advance?
Yeah, and I actually didn't know this until the book came out, Relentless. So I suppose it was a whirlwind half a year of football for me. Like, I was in bonus territory there, playing inter-county football, championship football, starting number 1, and I suppose leading up to the final, I just knew myself, I wasn't doing enough. Like, if we were back in the same position, the same thing, like, you know, would happen. Like, Elaine was more, she obviously had way more experience, and I suppose the way Eamonn did it was, and like I didn't know, he didn't tell people that, oh, you won't be starting, but when he did, obviously I was very disappointed, but looking back, I'm glad that he gave me the time to tell me, to know that I suppose I wasn't sitting in the dressing room and kind of hearing it firsthand in front of everybody. But I appreciate, I suppose, when you look back, that's what you see from the man. He obviously knew maybe if I didn't get the heads up that it would probably knock my confidence maybe a bit more than it would if he did tell me. And I think that's probably what made, you know, like it did drove me on after that. Like, and again, I was upset and whatnot for probably that day, but like there was an All-Ireland to be won. There was an All-Ireland to play. Like you had to row in behind the team, and he knew the players that, like, he knew the players that were around him, and he knew that, look, she'll be disappointed, but she'll get over it. And that's, I suppose, the measure of him. He knew how to read the team. He knew how to read the players. And I know he probably may have not done that to someone else, but maybe he felt, reading me as a player and as a person, he was like, maybe she needs this. And I suppose I didn't know that for a couple of years, until a couple of years after. And it's like hearing it now and reading it in the book, I was actually shocked myself. That like he appreciated me that much, that he told me that I wasn't going to be playing. And I suppose it's something to look back on and be thankful for him for doing it, you know, because I think it's probably why I am as determined as I was back then, you know, to be playing intercounty football.
And it's going to bring me nicely to the last question, Martina. And just before that, of course, Martina mentioned the book Relentless, Mary White. I read it myself a couple of years ago. It's an absolutely fantastic book. Gives a great insight into that Cork ladies football team under Eamonn Ryan's time in charge. Make sure, especially now in the climate we're living with at the moment, where people have more time to read, I guarantee you won't be disappointed. Martina, coming back to that last question as you were touching on there, and of course, you didn't look back. If anything, despite being dropped, it was probably that a confirmation that you were definitely accepted now and you were part of this team, and of course you still are part of the team and played in All-Ireland final just last month. In your opinion, what is Eamonn Ryan's lasting legacy on either Cork football or ladies football in general?
Like, I suppose it's not only Cork ladies football he's left an impression on. Reading all the tributes over the week, like, you have to see how many lives he's touched on and off the field. From players who were playing with different counties, they had nothing but good things to say about him. And I suppose his lasting legacy is his intelligence, both like coaching, knowing the game. He knew when he probably didn't know enough, so he went and he asked someone. I mean, humility, like he was never a know-all, you know, and I suppose he always said that himself. He's like, I don't know everything. If he didn't, he went, and he'd often tell us this. He'd be like, okay, I went away and I read a bit more about this, and he'd bring that information back to us and relay it. And sure, like, if you're like, he was a lifetime learner, and he taught us so much. But he just left a lasting impact, I think, on everybody. And anyone who has come in contact with him, whether it was on the pitch or off the pitch, when you met him, he knew he would give you the time of day. It was you he was talking to. It didn't matter what else is going on. He'll just give you. He's interested in what you have to say and what you're talking about. And should you meet him in 3 years' time, he'll probably remember who you were. And I've often heard a lot of people tell me that they might have met Eamonn once or twice and would have had a chat with him for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And they'd meet him again maybe at a football match or after an All-Ireland, and he'd know who they were. He might not have their name, but he'd know where he met them. And I think that's a sign of just a brilliant person, human being. Like, that's not anything to do with like his style of coaching or anything. That was just him being such a good person and just giving everybody that time that they deserved, I suppose. For me, I've learned so much, like, football, outside of football, like just how to treat people. I mean, it's great that he gave us so much on the pitch, but he gave us so much off. And I suppose that's his legacy. It wasn't just football. It was the life that you were living. He impacted that as much as he did on the field. And you see a lot of the girls, and he would have talked about it, the girls on the pitch had also really, like, they were doing really well off the pitch as well. And he was more interested in that than he probably was in how they're doing in football. And I remember actually probably the first months that I had made it on a team, he approached me, and all he wanted to know, he was like, are you okay? Do you need anything? How are you getting on traveling? Because I was traveling from Tralee to training 3 times a week, and he didn't want to know how my football was going. He was just like, are you okay? Do you need anything? How are you finding it? And that was him worried about how I was as a person, not how it was impacting my football or anything like that. So I suppose it's his impact that he had off the pitch as well as on a pitch that we'll really, really remember him.
I knew it was going to be a battle, and I knew they would be bringing a lot of bodies behind the ball. And I think we probably played into their hands in the first half. We used very slow ball. We didn't offload it quickly. We kind of delayed her up front, and they clustered us. And I mean, we were quite worried at half time. We weren't too happy with the team in half time, but second half, then they really showed what they're capable of,
Now, we're joined now by the current Waterford senior football manager, Shane Ronayne, but Shane also has worked with Eamonn Ryan for the last 2 years of that golden run for the Cork Ladies footballers. 2 of the last 3 years, winning All-Ireland in 2014 and 2015. First, Shane, thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me, Darren.
Shane, I read one article there that you got a chance to catch up with Eamonn just before Christmas. Obviously, we knew at the time he wasn't feeling well too, but for yourself personally, for your own friendship, that was something that was very, very important that you, I won't say a chance to say goodbye, but a chance to relive some great memories.
Yeah, look, I suppose I was, I knew Eamonn wasn't well, and I suppose the last time I actually met him physically was in November 2019. He was he came down to present the medals to the Tipperary team who had won the Intermediate All-Ireland. So, we dinner that night and we had a great chat. And, I suppose just before Christmas, I was talking to his brother Jim tonight that tonight is the actual All-Ireland ladies final that Dublin defeated Cork in. And Jim said he was after being brought back into hospital again. So, he suggested, give him a ring there now. So we said we can have a chat about the match. So I rang him and, you could tell he was sick, but we had a great chat about Cork and about the Dublin ladies and about the Dublin men, and we were talking about school and coronavirus and all these things, all the topics that usually have with him. Like he was full of stories, and I suppose I came away from that call. I suppose absolutely delighted. I had a great chat with him, like, because went down for about an hour or so, and he enjoyed having those chats as well because he couldn't have visitors at the time. But I suppose I left the conversation, Darren, and I knew he was sick, but I was hopeful, I suppose, that he would be able to pull through. But he was a great fighter over through the years, and he fought this very bravely again, and it was still a shock last week, to get the news that he had passed away. But I was so, I suppose, relieved that I'd had that great chat with him, that it was like old times having the chat with him, and topics for anything you could think about we were talking about, and he was great company, and that conversation will live with me forever, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to do it.
It was a friendship that's definitely built up in the last few years, especially going back to, I think it was 2013 when you first met him in person. You were in charge of the Cork under-16s at the time, and you asked him to come in and have a chat.
Yeah, I would have, I suppose, to come across him a couple more times, before that. Briefly, we would have played, I was over UCC O'Connor Cup team, and we would have played Cork in a number of challenge games. So I'd have briefly had, had contact with Eamonn. But I suppose the 13 under-16 on Ireland final, they played seniors played Dublin before that in Burr, and Eamonn came down to speak to the girls, and we ended up winning that game. And the senior players who were playing then. Hannah Looney, Emer Scally, Emer Meany, they were playing in that team, and then I suppose I got foisted upon him, as you might say. I was offered by the county board to go in as a selector, and I don't think Eamonn knew too much about it. But, you know, he didn't know too much about it, I suppose. But two of his selectors had stepped down, and you know, I gave him a ring, and I said, "Look, Eamonn," I said, "You know, I can come on board with you." And he was taken off guard, but look, 5 or 6 minutes later into the conversation, you're having a chat about different things, what you wanted to do. And the very first training session, I think, was above in Mayfield GA in January 2014. And you know, he didn't look back. It was, you know, we got on with what we had to do, and we built up a very good, I suppose, working relationship, and a very good, you know, personal relationship then as well from then on. And you know, he was a huge influence, and I suppose, even though we were kind of I was foisted upon him, he worked out very well. Sometimes that happens, and you can be very unlucky, you know, on both sides, for both parties. But I think for both parties, it worked out very well. We both, I suppose, enjoyed our roles, and you know, I certainly learned so much from Eamonn.
I was just going to say that because, Shane, you would have gone into that job with an impressive CV anyway. And of course, it's needless to say, we've spoken before, you've done very, very well since your involvement with that Cork team. But as you said, you learned an awful lot from Eamonn. Give us an idea of things you would have learned from Eamonn and the influence he had on your coaching career.
I suppose just his approach to training. He was so meticulous in his planning. You know, he had this hardback notebook that everything was in. You know, the plans were in it before training. So that's something certainly, you know, that you'd hear about it, and you know, you're making plans, but when you see it actually in action, see how well it worked. And again, he wasn't afraid to try things, you know, embracing other sports or something he might have seen in another sport. He might bring it in, try that out in a drill, or training, or try that out in a game. And again, you know, something very important. If it didn't work out, you know, sometimes when the drills don't work out or a game doesn't work out at training, you kind of tend to look at the players and maybe they're the problem. But with him, you know, especially that, you know, he was very honest. Maybe that drill doesn't suit us. Maybe that drill doesn't suit the purpose that we need it for. So he, you know, you mightn't have seen the drill again, but he had a stable of certain drills and certain games that were proven to work. And I suppose, you know, you picked up so many ideas from him. I suppose the other ideas about, you know, everything being so simple and so straightforward, and the fact that he was able to break down so many skills, you know, break down the teaching points. Something you were always taught as a PE teacher, you know, in UL and things like that, about teaching points. Eamonn just did that in every coaching session. He was able to break down the drill, you know, the kicking of points, the 2-hand, 1-hand kick, you know, things like that, and keeping the head down. All this kind of stuff was just, it all became natural. It nearly became a rhyme to the players that they knew it, you know, and I think that's very important. And little phrases he had about giving a hand pass, it was like giving a present to someone. You didn't fire it at them, or you didn't throw it on the ground, you didn't throw it too high. You gave it to them like you would be giving someone a present. And, you know, little things like that. I suppose just the way he planned things, the way he looked at things, the way he embraced other ideas, the way he was able to bring ideas, I suppose, you know, into team talks and things like that he was so widely well read, you know, he really gave you an insight into where his mind was. He was always reading, always looking for new ideas, and could pick ideas out of, you know, the strangest books and things like that. But I think Angela Welch mentioned the other day, he gave a speech one day about, and ballet was brought into it, you know, and you know, ballet was so far from Gaelic football, but like, that was the way it was. It was, you know, Martina O'Brien, who used to get mentioned. There was people who climb mountains, just so many things like that. And I think that I suppose I try to embrace that myself and try to read as much as I can, look at other sports, look at things that are going on in other sports, and you know, you see now at the Dublin men all the time. There's so many basketball tactics in the Dublin men's football team, and like Eamonn was trying all that kind of stuff, you know, way before that. So things like that, and I suppose just the way his manner around the players. You know, I certainly wouldn't be as mild-mannered as Eamonn is around the players, but it's something to, you know, you try and do. I suppose, look, maybe I'll mellow a bit with age, but Eamonn was certainly, his manner around the players was excellent, and you know, that is rubbing off on me, and I hope I can mellow a small bit more, you know, through the year.
Shane, you have to forgive me, but I've just had a vision there. I can't imagine you talking ballet with these Waterford lads when you finally get out in the field with them.
No, I'd say no. There was no valet talk, no. But you know, but like you just, I suppose, you learn to. He just everything he did was so in tune with what needed to be done, and he was able to see situations, and you know, I think and embrace them and just get that message across to the players. He was able to get the message across to the players. I think that's the most important part. We can all go in there with all these fancy ideas and, you know, have all these meetings and PowerPoints and all these things. And there was never any of that with Cork. You know, all meetings were fairly brief. They were very to the point. You know, I certainly learned from that. I would have probably in previous years to that, you know, involved with school teams and involved with underage county teams. Meetings would have gone on too long and things like that. And you'd be talking too long. But with Eamonn, it was always brief and to the point, and team talks were always brief to the point. There was no, you know, he really empowered the players. You know, like the dressing room was theirs at half time, and Eamonn would come in and talk for a couple of minutes. And that's what it really boiled down to. And just he kept everything so simple and so straightforward. And I think the players enjoyed that, and you know, they really appreciated that there was nothing too complicated, and everything and all those simple and uncomplicated drills and games, they worked.
Shane, I know you would have been disappointed that you didn't end up getting the opportunity to take over after Eamonn finished up in 15 with the projected nature of how it was going, but you stayed in contact with him, as you said, and did you often seek his counsel in your time with Tipperary or even with Mourneabbey?
Yeah, look, you would have bounced ideas off him and things like that, and he would have been, in fairness, he would have texted, you know, about different things, you know, so we would have stayed in touch, and you know, ideas about that, things that, you know, I suppose he was busy. He said 2 years directly after that, he was very busy with the Cork seniors. So, you know, he wouldn't have had time to come down, things like that. But we actually had actually planned to have him down a couple of times with Tip, but it didn't work out with timings and things like that. But, you know, his advice, and, you know, when you'd ask him something, you know, he was very straight to the point, and I suppose all the chats you would have had with him down through the years, you know, there was so much of it that wasn't about sport. It was about school and about, you know, life and about different things going on in the world. And like, you know, you just learned so much that way as well, that you had a fountain of knowledge from Eamonn. I think I said the other day that every day was a learning day when you were talking or you were with Eamonn, and you know, all those influences and those ideas that would certainly have rubbed off on me. And, you know, he was very, I suppose he sent me text after all those big games that we won with Mourneabbey and with Tip, and you know, I really appreciated those texts, and you know, I know they were heartfelt, and you know, so it just, that influence was always there in the background, and I knew if I needed something, I could contact him, and you know, so that's, you know, even when he came down to Tip last year, like, he was, I suppose, so he was very impressed with the girls and things like that. And I think that room that night I think I was the only person in the room that night that had heard Eamonn speak, and I knew that they'd all enjoy it. And so many people from Tipperary actually contacted me last week, you know, passing on their condolences and saying how much he had impressed them that night. And it was only one night with him, you know, one little speech of maybe 10 minutes, and they were just so taken with him, you know, young and old. And I think that's just testament to he could capture a room in that short space of time.
Valerie's goal, like, that was a real opportunist goal, like, you know. I mean, that would come off once in 10, but then Valerie is special, like, you know. She's a special player, and if I tried that now, I'd probably punch the ball across the field or over the bar. But she would be so calm and cool that she would have that worked out. She reminds you a bit of the Gooch, like.
Now, I'm joined now by our colleague Cóilín Duffy, presenter of SportsDaz Live. And Cóilín, you tweeted after Eamonn passed away that he was an absolute gentleman and a pleasure to deal with.
He certainly was, and I suppose there's not enough characters in a tweet to allow the amount of space that one would give to describe all of the attributes of Eamonn Ryan. He was an absolute legend, as I said, and a true gentleman who was an astute observer of the game. I was lucky to come across him fairly early on in my career. In fact, my first working ladies football All-Ireland final, as far as I know, was the 2005 one between Cork and your native Galway. Galway, of course, were the reigning champions from the previous year after that historic win over Dublin, their first and indeed only title to date. But certainly what a day to be present for that Cork win over Galway. And, you know, it was such a roller coaster run. And that's just the Cork senior ladies footballers. There's so much more to Eamonn Ryan. We'll talk a lot more now in the next few minutes about that. But certainly, like for remembering back to 2005, I covered an awful lot of that run. Their games against Meath, their games against Mayo, that All-Ireland final as well. And while I'm not a Cork native, I was privileged to be covering those games for a Cork radio station, Red FM. And just thinking back, like, what a time to be involved.
I didn't get to know Eamonn Ryan personally myself, Cóilín, and when I started covering ladies football, it was near the end of his time with Cork. But what were your impressions of him, especially in that 2005 campaign? As you said, you had the golden opportunity to report on a breakthrough All-Ireland success for a county that never won beforehand. It wouldn't stop winning for over 10 years.
Yeah, it was mad to think what would follow. But you did get the sense even back then, and I know it's very easy to say in hindsight, here we are 15, 16, we're into the 16th year of it since that All-Ireland final win. It seems like yesterday. It's amazing to think how quickly the time has gone and what Cork ladies footballers have done through Eamonn Ryan in those breakthrough years. And then obviously through to Aoife Fitzgerald as it is now, but certainly those were heady days. We have to remember Cork were never in an All-Ireland senior final before that year, so it was a real roller coaster campaign. I mean, I remember, Breed Stack, Juliet Murphy, Nullig Cleary, it all seems like yesterday, but how well Eamonn interacted with those players. It's cliched to say that, it was one big family, but definitely, and I've seen a lot of Gaelic games in the last decade and a half or more, and in terms of working, obviously a lot more before that as well. And what can be a rarity is how well management really well gel with their players. I mean, he had such a good word, weddings came after that and different moments in people's lives of players that he dealt with. And he was as much was in the sense that what you saw in public was also what you got from him in private. He was concerned about the welfare of people, a genuine deep interest in all of those players that came across him. He was involved, of course, with UCC teams as well. It's not just the ladies Gaelic football, but obviously on SportsDaz we'll be focusing more on that side of things with the ladies football. But everything from one of his latest projects, which would have been the return of the underdogs after so long as well. And I know a lot of the guys that were involved with the underdogs were also thankful for the knowledge and words of wisdom that he gave to them. And those were people who were just assembled for a TV show to come together as a team. And, he showed a genuine interest there and developed genuine interest as well. And interestingly enough, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I know because he was involved in the last underdogs, and I know ladies football underdogs was in train at the moment. I'm not sure if that process actually started in terms of filming, but there may be a possibility that he was involved with that project this year as well, obviously with his close ladies football links. So he will certainly be missed in that particular project as well, because he made a huge input there also.
He certainly did, and it showed how much he was respected, Cóilín, and how much he brought ladies football up so many levels as well, with the professionalism that he brought to the game from his own experience playing and managing Cork teams as well. Over those All-Ireland victories, Cóilín, and I'll ask you for a favourite moment in just a moment, but you would have gotten to know a lot of those Cork players as well. What did they say about Eamonn over that course of time? What comes back?
I think, there's so much you could say, as I said earlier, about Eamonn Ryan. And I suppose the common thread is basically a lot of what I've just said. It's that man who showed a genuine interest, who is an excellent, I suppose, the cliche in sport is maybe man manager. He was an excellent player manager. He really managed his players well. I know usually the term player manager is used when a player is both playing and managing, but he was the other side of it. He was that man who cared so much about his players that he probably would have gone out and kicked the football with them at a lot of the training sessions as well. I'm sure he was, he always credited the opposition. He was astute and honest, but emotional. He kicked every ball on the sideline. The man was really kicking every ball. He had a huge passion. And what a person, like a person that also spoke the Cúpla Focal as well, which helps when I was looking for Irish language interviews, but never refused an interview, was always willing of his time in giving interviews after matches. And I'm just thinking back, actually, the thought hasn't struck me because I've been busy quite recently since his sad passing, but it's dawned on me now. There's a lovely photo, actually. It's actually a screen grab from one of the league finals that they won in Parnell Park. And myself, Declan Drake, media colleague, of course, as well, and Eamonn, the three of us together were caught in camera after the match in the centre of Parnell Park. And it's a lovely memory to have, actually, that particular footage was caught. So yeah, it was fabulous. But to go back to your question, the players thought highly of him. He thought highly of the players, and there was certainly that mutual respect. And as I said, it extended right deeply into their personal lives, outside of their sporting lives as well.
I can tell, listen to you talk there, Cóilín, we often cultivate relationships with various people playing the games, and listeners can often forget we don't always just share a reporter, player or manager relationship too. And needless to say, otherwise we wouldn't be talking to you right now, Cóilín, you consider yourself very close to Eamonn.
Yeah, I suppose, you meet so many people when you're a reporter. You know yourself, Darren. Half of Galway know you, and you're probably wondering who half of them are, but they know you. It happens over the years that people, they kind of claim ownership, I suppose, of people in the media a bit as well. But likewise, I suppose, from my perspective, I have such a passion for ladies Gaelic football. I had such a passion for GA. And as I said, Eamonn wasn't just involved with ladies Gaelic football. He was also involved with colleges. And I was fortunate enough to be national third level GA PRO around that similar time frame we're talking about, that Cork were winning the All-Irelands. And of course, Eamonn was involved with UCC teams as well. So there was a bit of crossover there as well. But, it was one of those, I would say, another man who has sadly passed away in recent years and is talked about a lot, and whose memory will live on as well, Jimmy Corbett from Carnacon. Both Jimmy and Eamonn, I would put in the same bracket as people I just love to be around, love to chat to, really genuine people as well. And ladies football is greater for their involvement. Gaelic games is greater for their involvement as well. And I'm just thinking, like, when I think of people, and there are loads of people, who've gone to their eternal reward that you miss. But Jimmy Corbett is just one of those that springs to mind now when we're talking about the sad passing of Eamonn. And that, there are few people out there that could be described as legends of ladies Gaelic football in terms of management. And those two men are certainly up there, that they would rank overall in terms of Gaelic games as well.
I certainly would agree with you that, Cóilín, and when even Carnacon players that we've spoken to before have always spoken very highly of Jimmy. Before I let you go, Cóilín, a favourite moment, memory of Eamonn's time managing Cork?
Well, without a shadow of a doubt, it has to be that turnaround against Dublin in the All-Ireland final. I mean, I didn't really have to research or think back, and I'm looking, you're on Zoom here, and I'd say you have it in your notes there. I can't read your writing down, but that's because it's not because of your handwriting style, it's because the camera is a bit greasy. But that Cork, that comeback, what a moment. I mean, it was as much like, I mean, Eamonn will give credit to the players. I mean, thinking back to that final, it was one of the greatest finals I've ever been at. Like ladies football, camogie, men's football, hurling, and I've witnessed some great games. That was the great escape. I think it was Jerome Quinn caught him after that particular final and said, "Have you heard of this film, The Great Escape, Eamonn?" And he said, "You have." And, it was really a Houdini moment. I mean, it ranks up there with Offaly hurlers against Limerick in 1994. What a comeback that was as well. And many other Gaelic games comebacks too. But just you would say in one breath that was down to the experience of the players coming, they'd been in Croke Park before. They knew what it took to win All-Ireland. But at the same time, and while Eamonn had been there before and knew what it took to win All-Ireland, and the rest of his management team, of which, lest I forget, or lest I neglect to mention, he would have had great respect for that management team around him as well. That no man is an island, and Eamonn would be the first to say that as well. There's no I in team, and he certainly proved that as well. But the turnaround, what was said in the dressing room at halftime, I'll try and dig out the audio from the post-match if I can, because I'm sure we've asked that question. I mean, it's a bit of a cliched question to ask, but, I think from memory, no shouting, just keep things calm. I mean, Eamonn knew when to get emotional at the right point for the sake, not just for the sake of it, but, people talk of constructive criticism. I'll use the term here, constructive emotion. He knew when to press the button with certain players. He knew what made them tick, and he got it right 90% or more of the time. And any player that's ever come in to dealing with him will say that about Eamonn. He just had that something special, and what a CV to finish off with. And even I saw a tweet from the local club as well. He was involved there until the end as well too. So that's where it starts, that's where it ends, and that's what they say in terms of players anyway. And what a career, what a man.
And that was our colleague Cóilín Duffy, presenter of SportsDaz Live, giving us his memories of Eamonn Ryan. And also beforehand, we had the current Waterford senior football manager Shane Ronayne, Cork goalkeeper Martina O'Brien, and of course 11-time All-Ireland football champion, 10 of them under Eamonn Ryan, Rena Buckley. You might have heard some clips of Eamonn Ryan in between those interviews. They came from Cóilín. Glad he donated those to us. They were from the 2008 All-Ireland Football Championship campaign, the fourth All-Ireland title that Cork won during that glorious reign. As I mentioned earlier on, Eamonn Ryan's coaching pedigree doesn't just stop at what was achieved between 2004 and 2015. Let me give you some of the stats here. He played football for Cork between 1963 and 1968, played in the All-Ireland football final against Meath in 1967. In hurling, he was from hurling land, actually, Watergrass Hill, and won a Cork Junior A title in 1974 as a player and as a trainer, and also lived for a while in Thurles. How football got him instead of hurling, nobody will know. He was training the Cork men's team in 1983 when Tyg Murphy got the late goal that beat Kerry. Kerry, of course, had just missed out on the drive for 5 All-Irelands the previous year and were hoping to get themselves back in the mix. Not to be on that occasion. He's been involved in coaching the Napirsig hurling team, instrumental in county title victories in 1990, 1995 and 2004. And one of the first people to pay tribute to Eamonn Ryan was Cork hurler John Gardner. He won 3 Munster titles and 2 All-Ireland football titles with the Cork minor footballers in the early 1990s. He won 2 Sigerson Cups with UCC and also an Ashburn Cup in Camogie. And while he served as an officer with UCC, I think it was for 8 years, they won 3 Ashburn Cups in Camogie during that time. Just looking through other stats here as well. Scored 3 points against Kerry in 1966 to beat them in Munster. Kerry had been in the previous 2 All-Ireland football finals, but they did lose out to Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final. He's been described as the master. He's been described as a legend in his own lifetime. Ladies football remember him for what he achieved with Cork, but even I'm just scraping the surface of what he had achieved beforehand as well. We're looking at a sport now that can get over 50,000 people into Croke Park, and the way Eamonn Ryan and his Cork team conducted themselves are a massive reason why that is the case. The current Dublin squad taking up the mantle and bringing it further. Thank all our guests again and everybody who paid tribute to Eamonn Ryan since his death last week. 17 years to the day that he was confirmed as a coach for the Cork team in the 14th of January 2004. And sadly for us all, on the 14th of January 2021, we say goodbye to a legend, to the master, to Eamonn Ryan, Cork football leader, friend, father, hero. May he rest in peace.